Hello, everybody, and welcome to our first panel, the Agent and Author Chat. We're so excited to have you here. My name is Sarah Easterly. I'm one of the board members for the Adoptee Literary Festival and your Zoom tech for today to support this session. We're so excited for it. Just a couple of quick housekeeping notices. You may notice that the chat has been disabled. That's just to help keep the space as safe as it possibly can be. We are accepting questions though, and you just put those into the Q&A box that's in the lower portion of your Zoom controls. So use that, send your questions in, and then we'll get started here. I am so happy to introduce Sarah Conway. Sarah is a Chinese American adoptee based in New York and Taiwan. Sarah is the creator behind the Bookstagram Lyrical Reads and the digital editor at NV Media. Sophie Schmidt grew up always looking forward to the Scholastic Book Fair and trips to the library. She is currently an assistant editor at HarperCollins Children's Books. And Eric Smith is a literary agent with PS Literary, and he's also a young adult author whose books include Jagged Little Pill, the novel, and With or Without You. And I'm going to put their full bios in the chat so you can read them. I did the very high level ones because we have so much that we want to share. We want to let them do the sharing. So I will go off camera and turn it over to Sarah, who is the moderator for this session.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Welcome everyone to this author and agent chat. Thank you, Eric and Sophie, again for joining me today. I'm really excited to dive into our conversation. But before that, since we're all writers and we all know that writers need fuel, I just want to start off with an icebreaker question. What drink did you bring today and why?
It's funny because like in our to
Yeah.
give everyone a glimpse behind the scenes in our tech check, I was rambling about my choice. So I have my coffee here, but it is using the White Lotus limited edition coffee creamer that you can get at like CVS or the supermarket right now. It has an iced a Thai iced coffee flavor to it. It's very good. I highly recommend it.
We'll get you a sponsorship.
I know.
Yes.
As Sophie mentioned in the before chat, should make a ranking so you see how all the other ones match up.
I really would. For me, I have my empty iced coffee cup because I needed it before this. So I am now just drinking water out of my Michigan State water bottle, the green. We won our game last night, so
Yay. And then since I am in Taiwan, of course, you can't have Taiwan without bubble tea. So I have some barley tea with boba today. No caffeine because it's a little too late for that. But yeah, that's what I'm drinking today. Thank you so much for sharing that. And maybe one day I'll try the White Lotus, the coffee creamer. Who knows? Take a little sip. But yeah, when you're writing, like, is it kind of the same drinks, or do you try something else, or does it depend on the day?
for me, it's like the I think many writers have this as like your coffee and then your water and then your fun drink. So I often have a minimum of 3 drinks on my table or my desk. So, but at the very least, it's water. But a lot of the times it'll be tea or coffee or some sort of caffeination.
Got to keep that fuel going. How
Mhm.
about you, Eric?
I mean, I always just have some kind of concoction that would offend any like pro coffee drinker who like I have friends that like measure the coffee beans and they have a little scale and they do the pour over thing and I get my coffee and I fill it halfway with creamer of something that makes it taste like candy and then I'm good to go. Uh it upsets all of them, but That's my go-to.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so I'll just jump into the questions we have since both of you are publishing professionals. Eric, you're a literary agent. Sophie, you're an assistant editor at HarperCollins, and also one of Eric's clients. Could you give everyone a brief overview of your publishing industry journey and also why you decided to pursue publishing as a career path?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, mine I guess mine's a slightly unconventional. I always wanted to work in books. I went to moved to Philadelphia, went to graduate school for English, gonna work in publishing, gonna be a writer. That's my plan. And I got hired at Quirk Books here in Philly. I've been doing a lot of social media work for the city and the tourism board, and I was having a really hard time breaking into publishing. And Quirk hired me to be the social media and digital marketing person. So it was in charge of Twitter and Vine, if you remember that,
Oh
and
my
all of those different places. I was handling blogs. I was doing blogger outreach for book reviews, things like that. It was wonderful. I loved my time there. And I was there for a good 5 years, but there was no really moving into editorial like I wanted to. Like I wanted to be an editor. That was the goal. I started applying for places in New York. I couldn't really get interviewed anywhere. And then this agenting thing kind of fell in my lap. I saw the agency. I was working at PS Literary for the last 10 years. I just moved to my own agency. But PS was hiring an agent. I reached out to an agent on the team and I was like, hey, I did the marketing for like two of your books. I have my own, one of my own books is out. I've worked in publishing. I think I could do this job. Can I get an interview? Can I talk to somebody? And they graciously came all the way to New York because they live in Canada to come interview me and meet up for coffee. And I worked there for a decade, and it was wonderful. It was such a great team. And that's sort of my route. I got into publishing any way I could. Sort of clawed my way in. Um, got hired at an agency, and then just recently, started my own. Um, and yeah, I mean, I always wanted to work in books. I grew up, oh man, I feel like every writer has this story where they grow up with like well, I guess not every writer because I'm old, but like I had a typewriter that my parents gave me and I fiddled around with stories all the time and like always wanted to be in the library, always wanted to be at the used bookstore. So like I'm doing exactly what it is I wanted to do, forever. So yeah, no, that's the route there.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing your story. And yes, congratulations on opening the doors of neighborhood literary. So
Yeah.
excited. So excited to see your journey with your own company. And then Sophie, can you tell us about your publishing journey?
Yeah, of course. So the short version is I um I started working at an indie bookstore in my hometown in Michigan, and at the same time I had started writing like of my own review blog and like trying to learn how to like connect with other readers. And so like my blog and being on Instagram, my Bookstagram really
Mm,
thrust me into the world of publishing. And I was like, oh my God, people write and like work like they don't just write books, people work on books, and like
mm,
that's something that I could do for a career. And so ever since like I was 15, I was like, this is what I'm gonna do. So it's been something I've pursued for 11 years now. And throughout my time trying to learn more about publishing, I interned at a magazine writing some articles, interviewing some really awesome authors, and then that continued from high school to part of college. And then in college, I um,
mm,
studied editing, and then I studied lots of different like really cool things. And so I don't have a traditional like English major background. I am more trained in like rhetoric and editing, and then
mm.
um, I did an internship in Ireland at a small publishing house there, and then I graduated in 2020. um, And I did the Summer Publishing Institute at NYU in 2021 and then landed at HarperCollins like a month later. And so that brings me to today. So
Ah, wow, I didn't realize you did a study thing in Ireland. That's so cool. Oh my goodness.
yes.
And then yeah, since we met on Bookstagram, so it's also super cool like how Bookstagram can open up so many doors as well. And um everyone has a different story coming into publishing. So thank you for sharing your own stories. Um and Sophie, again, you were just talking about how you're an editor now, but you're also a writer. So, how did you start writing? And do you remember the first story you ever wrote?
Yeah, that's a great question, and probably a question I would have said no, I don't remember. Until I was home over in Michigan over Christmas. I'm currently based in New Jersey. I was going through my old bedroom at my parents' house, and I like found all of these old little journals where I hand wrote a lot, like maybe 1 or 2 pages. I didn't finish anything until 8th grade when I was writing short stories. But I hand wrote fan fiction for myself. But I didn't realize it was fan fiction, and it was all like self-insert of like, wow, I wish like my friends and I were on this adventure. Uh,
Mhm. Mhm.
or it was I was obsessed with Jenny Han's middle grade book, Shrug. And so I was like, this really needs a sequel. So I started writing a sequel. Um, but yeah, that's where I first like started writing stories. If you go even further back, I used to make up stories, new stories around my neighborhood with my neighborhood friends. And then my mom very graciously printed all of them. And then we would go door to door and sell them for like $1 or a quarter or something and made our neighbors buy our fake news stories. So I've been a storyteller for
Mm.
my life. I didn't seriously print an actual novel until 2022. And
Mm.
that's a crazy writing journey, but I started and finished a novel in like from June to August of 2022. So
Oh, wow. Oh
yeah,
my goodness.
that's the novel that brought me to Eric.
Oh, okay. Wait, do you still have like the like newspapers you sold to your neighbors? Do you still have a few copies of those?
Oh, I think they're lost to the wind, to be
Um,
honest. Unless my mom saved them, which is very possible, but I don't have any.
then I hope your neighbors also kept them because if neighborhood kids came to my door with like their little newspaper, I would so keep that around. But yeah, speaking again of before we switch over to Eric's uh answers to these questions, but so you wrote your first novel in 2022 from June to August, right? So then what caused you to query Eric specifically?
Um, Eric was the third Asian I ever queried, which is crazy. When you are in writing circles, or if you know lots of a single writer who is querying, is a stage that can take many, many, many years for people. So I feel very lucky that Eric connected with my story right away and made querying as painless as possible. um, but I knew, so I know this is a little later in the conversation, but I've always, when I set out to write that novel, I intentionally wrote it as an adoptee novel. And I knew I really wanted to have an agent of color, and I wanted to have, um, you know, there are not a lot of agents who are adoptees that I know of, and so it's like, how am I gonna make sure that my stories are gonna be taken care of and like
Mhm.
recognized in that way. Not that like I don't think that people who aren't adoptees can't understand adoptee stories, but I want it, I think it's a different sort of connection that you have to adoptee stories as an adoptee. So to me, I knew like Eric fit all of my check boxes. And I'm very grateful that he, I don't know, just like loved my story from the get-go. So I was very
Oh.
intentional in like
Mm.
knowing what I wanted out
Mm.
of an agent.
Mhm, well, then speaking of Eric, so how did you start writing since you're a literary agent but also a writer as well?
Have to unmute myself. My neighbor appears to be sanding everything right next door right now, so it's a little loud. So yeah, I mean, I did the same exact thing Sophie did. I was handwriting my fan fiction in a Trapper Keeper, mostly about X-Men. Uh, yeah, almost like exclusively about X-Men now I think about it. And then around like sixth grade or so, when I had that electric typewriter, I would type up little stories and I would give them away to friends at school. And it was usually about them, and I desperately hope none of them still have those stories. Maybe they do, and they're embarrassing. I don't know. But yeah, Sophie and I have a pretty similar how we started writing story arc there, which I think is lovely. And I think, and I don't know, I think this specifically speaks to a lot of kidlit writers, but like there's this drive when you're a kid and you're writing to write stories that you see yourself in. Right? And like when you're a kid and you're writing those fan fictions and you're writing those self-insert stories and you're writing stories about your friends, it's probably telling you something about what you're missing, right? And why you want it to be out there. So like, I don't know. I think me and Sophie had an agenda since childhood, and now here we are.
Wow. Mm, yeah. I love hearing about like where you guys started writing because when you think about it, you're like, you know what? I think I was always a storyteller. That's so cool to learn. Um, but let's see, then what did you see in Sophie's stories that made you want to be her literary agent? And when did you start working together?
Yeah, I mean, we started working together last year.
3 years ago,
3 years ago? Jesus.
true,
Oh. What,
2023.
I don't even know what time is. I don't know what time it. But I specifically remember pitching this book around to people and like telling them, I was like, oh, so I've been an agent for almost a decade now, searching for kidlit adoptee books, and this was the first one that I desperately had to have. Because I felt like Sophie wrote the book of my heart that I've been trying to find for a really long time. You know, it's this book all about these complicated feelings that you have as an adopted person, while at the same time trying to awkwardly balance how your parents feel about the whole thing, right? And like that's that's a really challenging thing for adopted kids and adopted adults, trying to parent the parent sometimes, which is a thing that happens to us adopted people. Um and like it just spoke to me on all these really, really wonderful levels. We're still out there trying to find it the perfect home, and I hope that we will because it is amazing. And if it's not this one, it's certainly going to be the next, or the next, or the next, because Sophie's awesome, and I'm very stubborn, and I'm a Scorpio who is loyal to a fault, so I'm not going to stop.
Well, then I hope we see Sophie, your book on shelves, or yeah, your book on shelves very, very soon. I'm also hoping yeah, read it one day. But speaking of books, obviously, when did you first see yourself reflected in the pages of a book? As you were saying, as adopted people, it's kind of hard to see that.
Okay, I have
Um,
a very funny one. So there's this writer named everyone knows who Gordon Corman is. He like just published his like 100th book. He's a monster. I don't know how he does it. And he wrote this book. Oh God, I remember reading it when I was probably in like sixth grade, called "My Life as a Trash Bag" is the title. And in the book, there's this character whose name is escaping me right now, but like He's flying to he's born on an airplane flying over like international borders before like his parents landed in America and everything. And he makes up this whole wild story when talking to people about where he's from. He's like, "Oh, I was born in a country called Pakafkia, and here's my wild backstory, and here's the wild food we eat." All of it is made up. He's just making it up because he desperately wants to feel like he belongs to something and that he is this impressive and interesting person. Now, it's not an adoption narrative, but that narrative is very true to adopted people in a lot of ways. Because growing up, I didn't know where I was from. New Jersey has the strictest adoptee records, at least they used to. They don't really have it anymore. So I had no idea, and my friends would always guess. And they're like, "Oh, Eric, you're this. Oh, Eric, you're that. Blah, 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 blah." And sometimes I would just agree, and I'd be like, "Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, whatever." Because I was a kid and I didn't know. And when I read that book, I was like, "Oh, it's maybe okay that I don't know these things, and maybe making stuff up isn't great, but it's okay to struggle with identity. Um, Sometimes it doesn't really matter as much as I thought it did, and like that book made me feel seen in a really interesting way. I don't feel like I read an adoptee book that I loved madly until. Probably until we read our mutual friend Shannon Gibney's See No Color. Um, like that book just rocked me when I read it. And I was like, oh my God, now I need to write books like this. Um, but yeah, it was that Gordon Corman quirky narrative there. It really grabbed me.
Oh, well, I remember that title very vividly, but I'll have to go back and read it again. I'm like, I think I just got a flash of a cover, so I'll have to see if it's correct now. And how about you, Sophie? When did you first see yourself reflected in the pages of the book?
Yeah, I think my Asian identity was recognized more first because I think a recurring theme of this panel will be like there are very few adoptee narratives out there that are written by adoptees. But Jenny Han's To All the Boys I Loved Before is the first book I ever saw an Asian girl on the cover. So it was like, oh my God, like not only is she a character, but she's on the cover. And like to go back to one of my all-time favorite books, her middle grade Shug, her Shug has a Korean best friend, Elaine Kim, and she's the coolest character of the book. Like she the the main character goes, "Oh, my mom says she has moxie," and that was like so cool to me that an Asian girl could be like so admired and so beloved in a way. And like I think I wish there was an Elaine Kim book out there, and I think that was one of the first books that I saw even a really cool Asian character. But I didn't really see or read adoptee literature until college. So um I think I think part of it's like I didn't one, there isn't a lot out there, and two, I think that's when I was ready to confront that part of myself. So I actively sought it out.
Yes.
And for I have a minor in Asian Pacific American Studies. And for that, I just like went headfirst into adoption literature. So Nicole Chung's All You Can Ever Know came out around that time. And so that was probably one of the first ones that I ever read and was like, this is really heavy, but I understand and see a lot of what she's saying here. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing, both of you. Yeah, as I was asking this question, I was kind of reflecting on like what my answer would be too, and uh, it was around college as well, where I really confronted my Asian identity and reading R.F. Kuang's The Poppy War. I mean, that's quite a book to realize, huh, this is kind of where the the history, like my background comes from. But yeah, and Stephanie Valentine's First Love Language, have to give a little shout out for that. Book is I would highly, highly recommend that one as well. I like tabbed pretty much every single page because I was like, I feel every single word so deeply of this story. But I'm glad you guys also found books that resonate with you as well. And like switching gears a little bit, intersecting this conversation, what has your experiences been like as adopted persons in the publishing industry?
Interesting question.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a little frustrating, right? Because I do see, the occasional like adoptee or foster kid book get scooped up that like doesn't come from what's the word? From a close place from somebody,
Mhm.
and like I desperately want to see those. Oh, I mean those stories that are genuine to the writer in a big way. So that's sort of like a point of frustration for me. But then there's a lot of points of joy in the mix too, where like I find out a certain editor is adopted, or I find out an agent is adopted, and I reach out, I'm like, oh my God, hey, we should collaborate on something. We should talk about this stuff. I should send you all these projects that I'm working on. And it's a wonderful experience when that happens, when you find your folks. It's the same for any adopted person, because oh my God, here's somebody who gets it. Um, it's not like there's a Wikipedia or like a publisher's marketplace listing where I can type in like adopted editors or adopted agents. That's not going to pop up. I don't even think it says that on my personal website because not everything is the internet's business. But when you find somebody, it's amazing.
Agreed, agreed. How about you, Sophie? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I agree with Eric. I don't think I've had as many experiences as him in which like I've found that sort of adoptee community. I think, I think the adoptee identity is one that isn't recognized as much because of many, many different reasons that I'll log this um, conversation down with. But, uh, it is always um, so nice to find that community when you do. And I think that, just like it is when you find other BIPOC in the space, it's just like another way where you can be like, oh, we haven't had the same identity, like journey, but we can see each other in that way. And I think that adopteeness especially is not an identity a lot of people are encouraged to explore. So like you have to also be careful in the way like, oh, yes, I personally have done a lot of like research and like understanding of like the geopolitics and the socioeconomic reasons that adoption happens, but you, other person, probably don't. And like
Mm-hmm.
have to be ready to like meet the person where they are in their own adoptee journey.
For sure, because the adoptee journey is complex for sure. For sure. Mm. And Sophie's talking about also, so you kind of touched on this earlier in the conversation, but as writers writing adoptee-centered stories, did you intentionally write adoptee characters, like thinking, oh, like I definitely know my main character is going to be an adopted person, or is this something that just appeared naturally?
That's a good question. I mean, some of my stories I've been sort of encouraged to do it. Like I've done short stories where someone has told me pretty specifically, like write an adoptee story for this collection. But now I find myself like almost aggressively doing it with all of my books. Like I have a middle grade book coming out in 2 years called The Adoptee's Guide to Surviving Seventh Grade, which is like firmly an adoptee story. It's right there in the title. In other books, like I had supporting characters who were adopted, or sort of like best friends that were adopted. I don't know, just because I didn't feel like I was ready to unpack a lot of it in a big way just yet. But I think I am now. I think I've got it.
I'm really excited for that book then. Can't wait to read it. And Sophie, can you tell us a little bit about that writing process?
Yeah, I think I've always found writing when I need it. And I really needed it at that moment in 2022. And I was newer to my job, and you worked with intellectual property, in which I would work with my team to like generate ideas where we can find other writers to execute it. It's a very common practice in publishing. Um, but I was talking with a friend. I was like, I wish there was this, adoptee story that like had magic, but also, confronted a lot of these really complicated feelings of coming of age and being the only person of color in your family, and also like confronting the complexities of who am I? And I think that like that's where YA is, and children's books especially, are so ripe for that, because like what is coming of age if not like having all of those feelings all at once? And it's not that I don't think you can have them as an adult. I just think that it feels so natural to experience those things all at once. And I really wanted to like wrestle with those feelings in my books. And I don't think I'm done wrestling with those feelings, but it's definitely like I wrote the book that I needed, and I wrote the book that I where I could explore a lot of those difficult feelings.
Oh, for sure.
Mm.
And I would love more books like that in the adult space, for those writers who are here and listening and thinking of pitching me at some point. Because like when you think about like kidlit story arcs and particularly young adult story arcs, it's figuring out who I am, figuring out what the world is like, figuring out my place in that world. But for a lot of adopted people, sometimes you kind of get stuck in that first part, that like Arrested Development that kind of clings to us sometimes. And man. I would love to read an adult book that like unpacks what it's like to figure out these other things with that first part somewhat missing, you know? So if you're thinking about your story arc for your adult novel out there, there's one.
I think back to Eric's point, it's like I think that what is a lot of missing in adult literature is and specifically adoptee stories, is like you cease to be an adoptee once you're not a child. At least that's the like common narrative predominantly in media. Because once you're an adult, and you don't need, there are a lot of services for adoptees and like groups for adoptees, but they're all like for kids. And so it's like you should have all of this figured out by now that you're an adult. But like I didn't look into this sort of part of myself until I was technically an adult. I was in college, and in college it's like you're an adult in training. So I think you get a lot of grace in that way. But like what are people who are, not in college, maybe people who are in their 30s, like figuring out their career, or like people who are in their late 20s figuring out their career? What do you like being you never stop being an adoptee. And like that's what I think is missing from a lot of literature.
Yeah. That and being funny, like be funny, like it's okay to tell funny adoptee stories, please.
Yeah, it goes back to like the I don't want to be like a trauma porn.
Yeah.
Like my joy is all, right alongside my sadness, you know, like I can't feel one without the other.
Mm.
And, you know, adoptees also live really happy, full lives.
Yes, we do. We do indeed. So I have then one last question that kind of touches on what you guys have been saying recently. But what do you think makes a Sophie story, and also what makes an Eric story?
I mean, I think what makes one of my stories is a lot of self-deprecation and a lot of like deflecting and projecting as a coping mechanism. So a lot of my characters are very immersed in pop culture, video games. I'm looking at my books over here right now, arcade cabinets, things like that, and they like try to make their passion their whole personality in a lot of ways. And part of their coming of age arc is realizing that that's not necessarily the best way to live. That you know, running a food truck is great in the case of my most recent book, but you know, taking care of yourself and your family is maybe a little bit better. Also,
And
references to music that kids won't know, like writers like John Green do this all the time, and I'm very guilty of it too. I am gonna make you learn about some mid 90s ska punk band, even though you probably won't care.
and I think I've read most of your backlist. I think that all of your books are so funny.
That's like hilarious. I love reading your books. I can't
Oh,
wait to
thank
read
you, my
more.
friends. I appreciate that.
Um, but yeah, I think for me, I think lately, because I'm newer to this writing full-length novel thing, I'm finding that I'm really drawn to telling stories that explore really messy relationships. Whether it's, you know, my first novel that we have is, you know, it's a really messy girl who is like coming of age. She's a senior in high school and she has this really complicated relationship with her mom. And then she has this really complicated relationship with her best friend. And she's like, what is going on? Why can't one of you just like be normal? But it's also, I think at the heart of a lot of my stories is that, you know, um there's the found family of, you know, the people that you meet along the way are gonna be so, so important to you. And I think that I try really hard to write all of my friends into a book in some way. And like, because I think that my friends and my family have given me so much love and I want my
Mm,
characters to feel that.
mm, mhm,
And there's always got to be some sort of little magic in it. I think that, you know, dealing in the speculative questions of um, my second ever novel that I wrote, I worked in a world where you could go and get your your heartbreak fixed
mm,
by another person. So it's like, what do you do when you think that you've fixed something, but it's maybe better that it was broken in the first place?
wow. That that's so cool, and I really do hope I can read your stories eventually. And can't wait to read more of Eric's, for example. But since you guys know each other best, being agent, author, etc., do you have a question or two for each other?
Well, I have a question for you, Eric. How is how would you say your taste has evolved over the course of your career? And for like non-publishing people, taste is like this elusive thing of like, oh, this is what I really like to work on, but um it's different for everybody and like different people will answer taste in a very different way. So I'm very interested in like how you as an agent and
I,
then an author have changed.
yeah, I mean, it's gotten it's gotten to the point where I like things that are weirder and weirder. So like the harder it is for me to determine like where it belongs on a bookshelf, the more likely it is I want to work on it. So like that sort of has been what's happened. Like I used to try to think as commercially as possible, because it would be nice to make money and stuff like that. But like now I just like stuff that's really out of the box and hard to define, because that's what's exciting. I think. Like I guess good examples are like if you look at my work with Kayla Ankrum and her YA novels, like they are wildly hard to define and genre defying. And I worked on a horror novel that came out last year called The Unmothers, which was about a horse that gave birth to a human baby, you know, and like I just make it weird and make it accessible, which I think is also the trick, because I think sometimes when people are trying to write weird stuff, they make the writing weird and not the story weird, you know? And you might have something special on your hands there.
Yeah, absolutely. Fun fact, Eric and I worked on Icarus by Kayla Ingram together in my editor and agent life. So Eric and I have worked on different projects, not just in the writing capacity.
Mm. Mhm. And let's see. Eric, do you have a question for Sophie,
I'm trying
maybe?
to think. I mean, I guess one question for you before we talk to everybody here, like you know, like how has working as an editor sort of influenced your writing work? You know, you see book after book and you're working on book after book. How does that bleed over, or does it bleed over into your writing life?
Yeah, that's a really great question. As an editor, I read lots of people's stories, and I think that I've been able to give myself a lot of grace in that way, where I'm like, we're all just trying to tell our own story. And like, um, it really helps for me to be an editor while on submission, because I'm like, you know what? All you other editors who have my book, I see you. You're also out here trying to like make the 9 to 5 work, and I don't want you to be doing extra work on the job. Like I firmly believe in the being paid what you're worth and working only what you're compensated for. So I don't ever want an editor out there to be like, but I'm so behind on my submission, and like my book is at the top of their list, but they just can't get to it because like I get it. I work the job that you work, and like I have that intrinsic understanding. Even though I do also have the very like fluttery author feelings of like, I just want you to love it. Please just like read it and love it and like make me an offer right now. So yeah, I think it's helped me keep a good head on my shoulders. At least I hope so.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, I wish we had a little more time to ask each other more questions. But it seems like we have a couple of questions in the Q&A.
Yeah, there's a bunch.
Yeah. Thank you guys
Okay.
for asking questions.
Really great job, all of you. Thank you. Wonderful conversation. So fun to listen in. We do have a number of questions here, and I'll read them for you. The first one is, do you think the misunderstood win-win adoption narrative makes getting adoptee memoir published a challenge? Is it just that adoption is too niche for a mass market? I've heard a lot of different opinions about why adoption memoir is so hard to get traditionally published. What do you all think?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't think adoptee memoir is necessarily hard to get published, right? Like my favorite adoptee memoir, where are you? It has a yellow cover. There's a problem with sorting your bookshelf by color. You can never find anything. Is You Should Be Grateful by Angela Tucker. This incredible adoptee memoir. You can tell how much I liked it because there's all the post-it notes everywhere for all the quotes that I like. Um, I think the trick with adoptee memoir and with any memoir, and it's the thing that I see missing the most when I get memoirs pitched my way, is what am I going to learn about myself by from learning about you and your story, right? All too often, like I get memoirs where it's just like, here's the beat for beat of my life and how hard things were, or how joyful things were, or how whatever things were, but I'm missing the what do I take back, right? So like I think about you should be grateful. And it makes me think so much, not just as an adoptee about my family, but just in general about my family, the things I take for granted, and like what would it be like to, not necessarily fit in as much as I would like. Like this deals with a lot of stuff that isn't just about adoption. When I think about any of my favorite memoirs, they all kind of do that, where there's like a big uh, reflection on yourself while learning about someone else who might be totally different from you. As long as you have that in there, you're gonna be fine. But if that's missing and it's just here's my life, that's not a memoir. That's not giving us what we need.
Um, I also will go in and agree that like I never adoptee narratives are only too niche if we make them too niche. Like we are here and we're saying that we deserve a space at the table, and so act like you deserve a space at the table, like is my advice. Like you deserve to tell your story in your own words, whether it's a novel, whether it's a memoir, and it's only too niche because the predominant narrative is that it is. And I think we're seeing a lot of people out there who are saying like, but these narratives mean so much to us. Like we had before this, we were talking about how many people signed up for this panel, and it's like I think that just goes to show that like people want to tell those stories, and I think that we deserve to.
Okay, we have another question. How could we go about seeking adoptee agents or adoptee copy editors or editors? Is it a matter of luck?
I think for copy editing and like your publishing team, you can really say to your editor and say, if possible, I'd love to work with this sort of team, but you're only constrained by the people out there who are available and ready to work on it in that way. But like, I know Eric and I have been very intentional in crafting my own submission list of like, these are the types of people that I'm hoping that we could like submit to, because I think that they are people that would understand the story in this way.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can't really like I know I made a joke about it earlier, but like you can't really look up like who's an adopted agent, who's an adopted editor. It's not necessarily going to be on their website. And like even if you get to the publishing level and you say like, oh, well, if there's an adopted person on the team, I'd love for them to, check this out. Maybe I'm working at that publishing house and I'm like, you know what? My home life is my business. I don't know if I'm gonna tell everybody, my personal story. So it might be a little hard. It might be.
Okay, the next question is for Sophie. What do you mean when you say you wanted your story to be taken care of in regards to choosing an adoptee literary agent?
I think that for me, I want my stories. I want someone kind working on them, and I knew that Eric was kind, and not just like a good business partner. And there are a lot of agents out there who are kind, and so it's just like sifting through the many agents out there and trying to figure out like what requirements were best for me as a person.
Okay. And someone missed the title of your book, Sophie, if you're willing to share it.
I am unpublished, so hopefully, someday down the line there will be a book title to share.
Okay, and another question directly for you, Sophie. How did you know when you were ready to query to an agent? And then the second part of that to Eric is, how do you pick authors to represent?
How did I knew um it was not my first draft that I submitted. Uh don't ever submit your first draft. I just think that you should refine your work before it's ready to go out to other people and finding other people to give you feedback on it, because if you're like me, you finish your novel and you're like, that's the best thing I've ever worked on. And I have to like live in this delusion of like thinking that my first draft was like the most beautiful thing. But in reality, it's not. And so taking time to like reflect and then rework it was really important. And my current iteration of my book is actually a revised one that Eric gave editorial notes on when he first, like when we first started talking, and he was like, what if you wrote this in first person? And I knew he was right in that moment, because when I was first drafting the book, I got 20,000 words in and I was like, what if this was in first person? But I was 20,000 words in and I was like, put your head down, finish this book first, and then you can see if it still works in first person. And so like I knew in that moment when Eric was like, don't hate me, but would you write this in first person? Um, like my own instinct knew that it was like, yeah, he understands this not just as like a person, but as an editor and like somebody who works in the business.
Thank you for taking that feedback, because that is a brutal email to get from an agent where it's like, what if you rewrite this whole book? Like, and you did it and it was amazing. Um, as for me picking authors to represent, I mean, it just has to be a good story. It has to be something I haven't seen before, has to be written well, it has to, you know, obey the rules of the market, at least to some extent there. And the writer has to be someone that I feel like I can work with, like the agent author relationship ends up becoming very personal as well as professional, and I need to know that we're gonna get along, if we're gonna work together. So good story, good personality, let's go.
Yeah, Eric and I were just texting about Severance last night, so
No spoilers. I didn't watch the
Oh,
latest
no,
one. Okay, here's a question. When and if your writing hits a primal wound nerve, what's your go-to self-care practice or routine? And then the second part of that is, how do you manage your family's responses to your writing about adoption? Pick
The
one.
second one is easy because I love my parents, but they don't read my books. They own all of them. They insist upon free copies, and they sit there on the shelf, but they don't read them, and that's fine. As for the primal wound thing, I mean, video games help a lot. Bad movies and TV, and just like going out to hang out with friends, like that's the refill the well thing for me and my writing. Um, yeah, I guess those are the big ones. Yeah.
yeah. I think for me, I usually probably cry about it just because that's how I express myself as a person, is like any big emotion, I'm like, my body's like, what if we just like let this out through tears? And I'm like, I've learned as like through many years of therapy of just like, you just gotta let your body do what you gotta do. And then, you know, finding that community and like finding the people who care about me and talking about it is, I think, to me, I'm just simply a yapper, and so I must talk this out with as many people as possible. And so like to go back to like my community that I've built around me, I think I've worked really hard to find people who are willing to listen to me talk about this for like hours and just be like, oh, and another thing about it. And then, just finding stories that maybe are not the same and just like escaping a little bit. And then for the second question, I don't really know how to navigate this very well. Sorry, Mom, I know you're listening. I haven't let a lot of my family read it because I'm just like, I have a lot of emotions about writing it still, so feel a little too close to it to like let many people read it.
Okay. Here's a question from a new mom, wondering if you know of any children's books where the baby or child has an adoptive parent and connecting with their severed roots along with their child.
Huh. I do not. I don't. I'm positive it exists. Um, but yeah, I don't know off the top of my head.
I don't know of any out there about specifically connecting with your roots. There was a book my family had when I was a kid, that I Love You Like Crazy Cakes, and that specifically is about a mom who goes and like adopts a baby from China. So that's all I know, and I don't think that like really touches on finding your heritage in that way. I'm so sorry.
That one might need some thought. Okay, here's a question about novels. What do you feel most mainstream novels miss when portraying adoption? On the flip side, what is well encapsulated in your opinion?
I don't know if it's something that they miss, but I think it's something they focus on too much, and that's like, let's zero in on the experience of the parents and how stressed the parents are. Um, and while that's a valid story, I want the kids. I want to know what the growing up experience is for them in particular. Um, I'm less interested in the story that zeroes in on the parents and more about the children. Things that are encapsulated well. I mean, I feel like some of my favorite adoptee stories in children's books do really great jobs of like giving us that interiority that kids deal with when it comes to this. I mean, Sophie, you do it a lot in your books, and it's wonderful. But like, my friend Lauren Gibaldi wrote a book called Autofocus. Now, Lauren's not adopted, but like that book is perfect. I love that book, and like the interior struggle that the character goes through in that book is it nails it. It nails it. So that's one thing I see that pretty often.
Yeah, I think I agree with Eric, and like it just the focus is wrong, and like if it is there, it often is like a negative thing and or the butt of a joke. And it's like um you grow up so around it so frequently that it like starts to not, you don't notice it, but like now that I've started to like notice things, I'm like, this is much more insensitive than it should, it can be. Like I think there's just not as much care around adoptees as there are like even like BIPOC stories. Just because I don't think there are enough people out there who are telling those stories. And then to go back to Eric, like the interiority, the questions, the thoughts that you feel. One of the first books that I worked on at Harper was You Only Live Once, David Bravo by Mark Oshiro.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful. It's like one of the most I just like feel so strongly about it because I didn't think that I would ever so early in my career get a chance to work on adoptee stories, and Mark's out there like just killing the game, and um David Bravo really struggles with connecting with his roots, and he goes through that whole like journey of like trying to figure out who am I, and like why can't I answer the question of like what is my heritage?
Okay, we do have a hard stop at the top of the hour, so that is our last question. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them. There were some really wonderful questions, but some of these I think you actually just answered in some of your responses. So you're impressive, all of you. Thank you so much for all of you who attended. We hope you'll join us for our next event featuring, we have 2 more panels coming up. We have our sizzle reel afternoon workshops if you registered for those, and readings by our presenters. Please remember to support adoptee writers by purchasing their books through the Loyalty Bookstore link. I'll put that in the chat. And we do, just a reminder that we do accept donations. I'll put our Venmo in there too. We're very grateful for any donations, and that helps to pay our fabulous presenters. So thank you so much, Sarah, Sophie, and Eric. We loved having you, and take care, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.